She had spent 7 years helping law enforcement find people who didn't want to be found. Fugitives, fraudsters, ghost identities built from stolen names and borrowed faces. She was good at it, frighteningly good. And then one Tuesday morning, a morning like any other, coffee going cold on her desk, the hum of servers filling the air, she opened a routine flagged file and saw her own name. Not a coincidence, not a glitch. Her name, her photo, her address, linked to 3 unsolved crimes she had never heard of. What do you do when the system you helped build turns around and builds a case against you? Her name was Miriam Osei, 34 years old, data analyst, quiet life, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. She had a master's degree in computational forensics. She'd published papers on predictive identity mapping. She consulted with 3 separate law enforcement agencies across 2 states, helping them untangle the webs that criminals weave when they try to disappear. She understood, better than most, how the system worked. Patterns, metadata trails, cross-referenced databases, surveillance cameras talking to license plate readers, talking to cell tower pings, talking to purchase histories. She had helped put 14 people behind bars in 7 years. She believed in the system, completely, faithfully, until the system looked back at her. The file she opened that morning wasn't supposed to land on her desk. It had been misrouted, a clerical error so ordinary it barely registered. A wrong click in a drop-down menu. But fate, it seems, has a habit of arriving through the wrong door. She almost closed it. She almost moved on. Instead, she scrolled down, and there it was. Subject, Osei, Miriam Adwoa. Status, active person of interest. Linked incidents, 3. The first thing she felt was not fear. It was confusion. A cold, clinical confusion. The kind her brain was trained to feel before it began pulling a problem apart. She leaned in closer. The first incident was a financial fraud case from 18 months ago. A woman had used a fake identity to drain a small business's account. The name on the fraudulent documents, Miriam Osei. The photo on the fake ID, a grainy image close enough to her face to pass through an automated recognition scan. The second incident, a hit and run in a city she hadn't visited in 3 years. A silver sedan, the plates registered to a vehicle she no longer owned. A car she had sold 2 years prior through a private sale to someone she'd never met again. The third incident was the one that stopped her breathing entirely. A woman matching her description had been caught on CCTV entering a building at the center of an active fraud investigation. The timestamp on the footage showed a Wednesday evening in March. Miriam checked her calendar. She had been at a conference 400 miles away, with witnesses, with receipts, with a hotel key card that logged her entry at 9:47 p.m. She had an alibi for every single one. But the system didn't know that. The system only knew what it had been fed, and someone, or something, had been feeding it her name. This is the part of the story that should frighten all of us, because Miriam Osei didn't fall through the cracks of a broken system. She fell through the cracks of a system that was working exactly as designed. Here's what Miriam understood, and what took investigators months to begin to accept. She wasn't a victim of a single mistake. She was a victim of a cascade. It started with the car sale. The buyer had used her old vehicle as part of a broader identity scheme, swapping plates, rebuilding paper trails. Her name became a useful fiction for someone who needed a real person's history to hide behind. Then came the facial recognition. Automated systems, scanning databases, flagging similarities, not certainties, similarities. A 68% match became a 72% match became a file. A file became a flag. A flag became an alert, and an alert, in a busy department with hundreds of open cases, becomes a suspect. No human being had made the initial connection. An algorithm had. And here's the thing about algorithms. They don't second-guess themselves. They don't stop to consider that the woman in the grainy CCTV image might be someone who looks like Miriam. They don't factor in that two women in their mid-30s with natural hair and similar bone structure might trigger the same markers in a system trained on imperfect data. They flag, they file, they move on. Miriam would later learn that facial recognition systems, at the time her case was built, had error rates of up to 30% for darker-skinned women, compared to under 1% for lighter-skinned men. She had spent 7 years feeding data into these systems. She had never once thought to question who the systems might fail. Until they failed her. She didn't panic. She documented. That discipline, the same discipline she had used to build cases against others, became her shield. She gathered her conference receipts, her hotel logs, her time-stamped emails. She pulled every piece of digital evidence that placed her somewhere other than where the system said she was. She compiled it into a file that would have impressed any prosecutor, and then she walked it into the very building where she worked and asked someone to listen. What followed was not swift. It was not clean. It took 11 months, 2 internal reviews, a formal appeal, the involvement of a civil rights attorney who had handled 3 similar cases in the previous 2 years. All women, all with the same profile, all flagged by the same class of automated system. 11 months of her career on hold. Colleagues who grew quiet when she walked in. A consulting contract canceled without explanation. 11 months of proving document by document that she was exactly who she had always been. She was eventually cleared, completely, officially. The file was closed, the flag was removed, and the system moved on to the next name, the next face, the next person who hadn't yet looked up from their desk and seen themselves on the list. Miriam Osei still works in data analysis. She still believes in the power of information, in the importance of evidence, in the possibility of systems that are fair. But she thinks about something now that she never used to think about before. She thinks about the people who don't have her expertise, who can't read the file, who don't know what an audit trail is or how to request one, who sit in a room across from a detective with a printout and a question they can't answer, because the question is based on data they were never allowed to see. She thinks about them a lot. We built these systems to find the guilty, but no system built by human hands is perfect. And every imperfect system, given enough time, will eventually point its finger at someone who did nothing wrong. The question is, when it does, will anyone be listening? Or will the algorithm simply move on?